A quiet black teen walks into his new school on day one, and within hours, the billionaire's spoiled son ties him to a tree, mocks him on camera, and uploads the video for millions to laugh at. But what none of them knew, the boy's father is the chief of police. The moment that video goes viral, everything flips. Police storm the campus. The billionaire's son is arrested on the spot, and the entire case lands in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, where the truth he uncovers leaves everyone speechless. Stick around, because what happens next is something America has never seen before. Drop a like for the video, subscribe for more stories, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The first time Gibson Duane walked into Jefferson High, the air felt heavier than it should for a California morning. The sun was bright over the low sprawl of the school buildings, heat already rising off the asphalt parking lot. But the weight sat in his chest, not in the sky. Kids were everywhere, slamming locker doors, shouting across the courtyard, earbuds in, backpacks hanging off one shoulder like they couldn't care less. Gibson adjusted the strap of his own backpack, kept his head level, and moved straight through the courtyard like he had a destination, which he did. Main office, schedule, lay low. 18, tall, lean, dark-skinned, with that quiet intensity that made people either curious or uncomfortable. Today, he wanted neither. Only the principal knew who his father was. Back in their small rental house that morning, his dad had stopped him at the door, hand on the knob, badge glinting faintly on his belt. "Remember," Chief Marcus Duane had said, voice steady, "you are not the chief's kid in there. You are just Gibson. Let me worry about the rest." Gibson had nodded. That's the plan. Now, walking past a clutter of picnic tables and a faded banner reading "Welcome Back, Eagles," he tried to disappear into the noise. It almost worked until he passed the basketball courts. The sound changed out there. Less random noise, more focus. Ball smacking against pavement, rubber squeaks, a few sharp bursts of laughter that felt meaner than the rest. A bunch of guys clustered around the far hoop, all varsity jackets and confidence. The kind of kids who didn't wait for anyone to tell them they ran the place. At the center was one guy who didn't need a jersey to prove anything. Bradley King. You could tell just by looking. Broad shoulders, light brown hair cut sharp at the sides, expensive sneakers almost too bright for the worn blacktop. His friends framed him without even realizing it, like he was the sun and they were orbiting. His laugh was loud, careless, but when his eyes lifted and locked onto Gibson, the laughter stopped. For a second, everything narrowed. Gibson felt it like a line pulled tight between them, him, the new black kid in a borrowed hoodie, and the rich white kid whose dad's name was on half the businesses in town. 3 seconds. That's all it was. Long enough. "Hey, new guy," one of Bradley's friends called out, cupping his hands around his mouth. "You lost or something?" Gibson stopped just long enough to be polite, turned his head slightly. "Just looking for the office," he said, voice even. "I'll be out of your way." Bradley spun the ball lazily on his palm, eyes never leaving Gibson. When he spoke, his voice had that casual authority that came from never being told no. "Then watch where you walk," he said. "People earn their space around here." A few of the guys chuckled under their breath. It wasn't loud laughter. It was the kind that told you they were waiting to see what happened. Gibson held his gaze without hardening his face. "Didn't it know walking was something you had to earn?" he replied, tone calm, almost soft. Bradley's smile was small and humorless. "Guess you'll learn soon." No one said anything after that. The air felt different, like someone had turned down the volume on the rest of the world. Then a bell shrieked from inside the building, and the spell broke. Kids started moving again. Conversations resumed. Gibson turned away, found the main building doors, and didn't look back, but he could feel it. Like heat on his neck, the first line of a day that wasn't going to stay ordinary. Inside, the hall smelled like cleaning chemicals and old paper. Gibson picked up his schedule from the office: AP Math, U.S. Government, English, all the usual, and navigated through a maze of painted cinder block and trophy cases. A few kids glanced up as he passed. Some looked away quickly. Others sized him up like they were adding him to some internal ranking. At locker 217, he spun the combination, the metal lock clicking open. As he swung the door out, someone brushed his shoulder hard. Not enough to knock him down, but enough to say it wasn't an accident. "Watch it, new kid," a voice said behind him. Gibson straightened and turned. Bradley was there, one palm flat on the locker next to his, leaning in like the hallway was his living room. Up close, he smelled faintly of expensive cologne and gym sweat. Gibson kept his hands at his sides. "Didn't mean to bump you," he said. "My bad." Bradley tilted his head, that same almost smile on his face. "Didn't say you did," he replied. "Just letting you know people take space serious in this hallway." The hallway noise thinned again. Nearby students pretended to dig in their backpacks, but their eyes stayed locked on the two of them. "Got it?" Gibson said. "I'm just trying to get to class." "Yeah," Bradley said, leaning a little closer, voice dropping. "I heard. You just passing through, right? Here's how it works. When I talk to you, you look at me. That's respect." Gibson met his eyes fully now, spine straight, face relaxed. "Respect goes both ways," he said. For one long heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Bradley let out a low chuckle, pushed himself off the locker. "We'll see about that," he said. "You'll learn how this place works." He walked off with his entourage, leaving Gibson standing next to his half-open locker, the tinny echo of the hallway returning like nothing had happened. But something had. You could feel it. By third period, the day had settled into a rhythm. Same fluorescent light, same drone of teachers explaining rules and syllabi. But the tension from the morning sat in the back of Gibson's mind like a splinter. Math was different. "Functions and variables," Mr. Holden said, capping a dry erase marker and turning back on the class. He was in his early 40s, with tired eyes and a tie that didn't quite match his shirt. But he spoke like he actually liked what he was teaching. "You're going to see this on Friday's quiz, so let us not zone out yet." Gibson sat in the middle row, notebook open, pen already moving. Numbers made sense. They didn't care who your dad was. At the back of the room, he could hear the faint pop of chewing gum. Bradley's chair creaked. The rhythm of it pressed on Gibson's nerves, like a finger tapping on glass. Mr. Holden finished writing an equation, stepped back for a moment, then scanned the room. His eyes landed on Gibson. "Let us get our new student involved," he said. "Gibson, you want to give this a shot?" A low murmur moved through the class. A couple of kids turned in their seats. At the back, Bradley's smirk widened. "Hope you don't choke, new guy," he muttered, not bothering to keep it quiet. Gibson stood slowly, took a piece of chalk and walked to the board. The equation wasn't too easy, but it wasn't too impossible either. He'd seen worse. "Talk us through it," Mr. Holden said. Gibson nodded. You start by isolating the variable, he said, his voice steady. He underlined part of the problem. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Keep it balanced. He wrote each step carefully, explaining as he went. His handwriting was neat, his logic clear. Somewhere behind him, the gum-smacking stopped. When he circled the final answer, Mr. Holden stepped forward, studying the board. That, he said, is exactly right. Nice work. Very clear. A couple of kids made those small, impressed sounds teenagers make when they don to want to clap, but can help reacting. A girl near the window gave him a quick nod. Even the kid in the hoodie next to Bradley glanced up like he'd just recalculated something in his head. Bradley's smirk didn't disappear, but it twitched. Gibson put the chalk down and went back to his seat, the small buzz of satisfaction warm in his chest. It wasn't about showing off. It was about proving to himself more than anyone that he wasn't shrinking to fit. When the bell rang, chairs screeched, backpacks zipped. As Gibson passed the back row, Bradley leaned forward just enough for only him to hear. "Don't think being smart puts you above me," he said. "This is still my school." Gibson paused, looked him right in the eye. "I don't need to be above you," he replied quietly. "I just want to bow down." He walked out without waiting for a response. By lunch, the school felt heavier. In the cafeteria, the noise bounced off the walls, metal chairs scraping, fryers hissing, someone laughing way too loud. Gibson grabbed a tray, took a sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water, and headed for the courtyard. He needed air. Outside, the Los Angeles sky had softened into a hazy blue. The big oak tree in the far corner of the yard cast a wide circle of shade, away from most of the noise. Gibson had seen it earlier and claimed it in his mind, not as territory, just as a place that didn't demand anything from him. He pushed through the cafeteria door with his shoulder and stepped out. The breeze lifted the edge of his t-shirt. A few scattered groups sat at benches, eyes on their phones or on each other. He was halfway to the tree when the now familiar voice slid in behind him. "Well, if it isn't the math genius," Bradley said, his tone light but edged. Two of his friends flanked him, one spinning a basketball on his finger, the other sipping a soda. Gibson didn't turn at first. He tightened his grip on the tray and kept walking, eyes locked on the patch of grass under the tree. Then Bradley took one longer step, his shoulder brushing Gibson's arm. The tray tilted. The bottle skidded. A streak of cold water sloshed out and splashed across Bradley's spotless white sneakers. The courtyard went quiet like someone hit a mute button. Water dripped slowly from the laces, darkening the pristine leather. Bradley looked down, then up. The easy arrogance was gone from his face. What replaced it wasn't just anger, it was wounded pride. "What the hell, new kid?" he snapped, voice cutting through the air. Gibson froze, pulse ticking faster now, but his voice stayed steady. "It was an accident," he said. "You bumped me." "An accident," Bradley repeated, softer, more dangerous. "You think that's funny?" "No," Gibson replied, raising his hand slightly, careful not to spill the rest of the tray. "I said it wasn't tea on purpose." Around them, kids had stopped walking. Some stayed in motion just enough to pretend they weren't watching. Others turned fully, their trays suspended halfway between table and trash can. "You got nerve," Bradley said, stepping close enough that Gibson could smell his cologne again. "You walk in here, make me look stupid, and think my bad covers it?" "I'm not trying to make you look like anything," Gibson said quietly. "It is just water. You walk too close, that is all." The words were simple, but they cut. Bradley's jaw flexed. A flush climbed his neck. Before he could act, the bell above the cafeteria doors shrilled for the next period. Everyone jumped a little. Teachers began calling kids inside, voices rising over the buzz. Bradley stared at Gibson for one long second, then took a step back. "We were not done," he said, low, promising. Gibson didn't answer. He watched him stalk away, friends trailing behind, then finally exhaled, shoulders loosening just enough for him to keep moving. But he knew it now. This wasn't he going to fade. The water on the shoes wasn't the real problem. It was the story Bradley would tell himself about it, that someone had disrespected him in front of his audience. By the last break of the day, the courtyard felt different. The laughter was thinner, the air tight with expectation. Under the oak tree, Gibson sat with his back against the rough bark, lunchbox resting on his knees. He'd chosen this spot because it felt out of the way, like the one place that belonged to no one. He bit into his sandwich, tried to focus on the simple, ordinary act of chewing, swallowing, breathing. The events of the day stacked inside him, one on top of another: the look on the court, the locker, the math problem, the water. He refused to let his hands shake. His face stayed calm. That calm, he knew, had always been his shield. And it was that calm that made Bradley restless. Footsteps crunched over the dry grass. Gibson heard them before he saw anything. The laughter came next, sharper, closer. "Well, look who was hiding under his favorite tree," Bradley said, stepping into view, the afternoon sun at his back. Two of his friends were with him, the basketball kid and the soda kid. The ball bounced once against the dirt. The soda hissed open, the can cracking. Gibson looked up slowly. "I am just eating lunch," he said. "There's room out here for everyone." Bradley tilted his head. "I don't see it that way. You sit under this tree like you own it now. You think one right answer on the board makes you special?" "I'm not trying to be anything," Gibson replied. "You were the one still talking about it." The line landed cleaner than he meant it to. Bradley's smile disappeared, replaced with something flat and cold. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe you need a reminder about where you fit." From behind his back, he pulled out a coiled length of rope. For a second, the world felt unreal. The murmurs started before the rope was fully visible. Kids had been circling, drifting closer without committing. Now they stopped, eyes locked on the rope, on the tree, on Gibson. "You don't want to do that?" Gibson said quietly. "Oh, I think I do," Bradley answered, tossing one end to his friend. "Hold that." They looped it over a low branch. The rope scraped against the bark with a dry, ugly sound. Someone near the edge of the crowd whispered, "Dude, this is messed up." Someone else hissed, "Shut up, he'll hear you." Gibson's muscles tightened, but he didn't scramble, didn't beg. He stood as they stepped closer. "You think this makes you strong?" he asked, voice low. Bradley's eyes glittered. "It makes everyone else remember who's in charge." Hands grabbed at Gibson's wrists. The rope bit into his skin as they pulled his arms behind the tree, tying the line around the trunk, knotting it tight enough that the bark dug into his forearms. Phones came out now, screens glowing. Some kids lifted them high, already recording. Others held theirs low, as if that made it less wrong. Gibson tested the rope once, felt it hold. He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed straight ahead. "You don't get it," he said, not just to Bradley, but to the whole circle of faces around him. This isn't a power, it is just fear, and fear doesn't last. Bradley stepped back, spreading his hands like he was showing off a trophy. "Relax," he said loudly. "It is just a joke. You wanted attention? Now you've got it." No one laughed. The silence that followed wasn't fun. It was heavy, wrong. A girl near the front bit her lip. A boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, thumb hovering over his phone screen. "He's gone too far," someone whispered. "Should we tell somebody?" Another hissed. They didn't know it yet, but one of those kids had already hit post. The video of a black kid tied to a tree in an American high school courtyard, surrounded by laughing, nervous teenagers, was already on its way to burning through the town's phones and beyond. And not even Bradley knew that the police cruiser racing down Maple Avenue toward Jefferson High carried the one man he never wanted to meet this way. Chief Marcus Duane, the father of the kid tied to the tree. Chief Marcus Duane's patrol SUV screeched to a stop outside Jefferson High, tires biting into the curb so hard a group of students nearby jumped. The engine was still rumbling when he threw the door open, his badge clipped hard to his vest, the weight of authority pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. He didn't even close the door. The radio on his shoulder crackled, dispatch asking for an update, but Marcus didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the courtyard, through the tall iron fence, the crowd of kids, the uneasy silence, the faint glint of something hanging from the oak tree. He felt it before he fully saw it. A father's instinct stabbing through a police chief's training. He started walking, fast, controlled, every muscle tight. As he pushed past the front office, the receptionist called out, "Sir." You can tell, but one look at his face stopped her cold. Students parted like water as Marcus strode down the hallway. They whispered when they recognized him. "That's the chief. Why's he here? What happened?" But Marcus barely heard any of it. His pulse thundered through his ears. Every step closer made the rope around his son's wrists sharper in his mind, clearer, like a nightmare playing before his eyes. He reached the courtyard doors, shoved them open, and froze. For half a second, the world spun in slow motion. His son, his quiet, respectful, disciplined son, was tied to a rough oak trunk, his wrists bound behind him, rope biting through his skin. His back pressed against the bark, shirt creased, breaths steady but shallow. Around him, students stood frozen, phones raised or lowered in shame, some pale, some nervous, some realizing at that moment just how wrong everything was. And standing in front of him, arms crossed, chin lifted, a smirk half fading, was Bradley King. Marcus didn't need a shout. His voice came low, controlled, dangerous enough to cut through the entire courtyard. "Untie my son." Every student there turned toward the entrance. A ripple went through the crowd, the kind of ripple that comes when someone realizes they've crossed a line they can uncross. Bradley's friends went still. One dropped the basketball. It bounced once, twice, then rolled until it hit a bench and rocked in place. Gibson looked up, eyes widening just slightly. Relief flickered, but so did something else. Embarrassment. He had worked so hard to keep his father's identity hidden. And now here he was, walking straight into the center of the school like a storm. Bradley recovered. First, he always had something to say. "Who are you to bark orders?" he scoffed, folding his arms. "This is a school matter." Marcus stepped forward. Slow, heavy, purposeful. "I am the man telling you that you will untie my son." He He emphasized each word so sharply they fell like slabs of concrete. Bradley let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Your son. Then he should have learned not to. He didn't get to finish. Marcus removed his badge from his belt and held it up. Chief Marcus Duane, he said, voice cold enough to freeze the courtyard. Los Angeles Police Department. And you are? The boy trespassing the line between misconduct and felony assault? Gasps burst around the circle. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else mumbled, "He is dead. He is actually dead." Bradley's posture changed. Subtly, but enough. His jaw clenched. The smirk drained from his face. His friends stepped backward like animals sensing a predator. You gonna make a big deal out of this?" Bradley stammered, his arrogance now wobbling. It was just a joke. Marcus walked directly up to him, their faces inches apart. "You tied a student to a tree," Marcus said. "You bound his wrists. You humiliated him in front of a crowd. And you want to call that a joke?" Bradley swallowed hard, but tried one last stand. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper that froze Bradley in place. "You touched my son. It concerns me more than anything in this world." He could feel the courtyard watching him, could hear the phones recording everything, but he didn't care. The badge didn't matter now. The title didn't matter now. He was a father, and someone had hurt his child. "Untie him," Marcus said again. Bradley's hands shook as he fumbled with the rope. His fingers slipped. He pulled too hard. The knot wouldn't let go. Sweat beaded at his forehead. "Hurry," Marcus commanded. Bradley finally tugged the rope loose enough for Gibson to bring his arms forward. The fibers had dug into his skin, leaving angry red lines. His fingers flexed stiffly as blood rushed back. Marcus stepped beside his son, checking the rope marks, scanning his breathing, his posture, his eyes. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Gibson nodded once. "Yeah, I am okay." But both of them knew he wasn't, not really. Marcus turned back to Bradley. "Hands behind your back." Bradley blinked. "Well, what?" "No. You can arrest me. My father." "Your father," Marcus said, pulling out his handcuffs, "is going to pick you up from the station after I book you." Gasps erupted again. A few kids backed away. A girl dropped her phone. "This is insane," Bradley shouted, voice cracking. "He spilled water on me. He disrespected me." "It was just felony assault," Marcus said calmly, clicking one cuff on Bradley's wrist. "False imprisonment, harassment, and endangerment." The second cuff snapped shut. "You're lying. You're exaggerating. My father will sue this whole department." Marcus turned him toward a crowd, voice booming now. "You think being rich makes you untouchable? That you can do anything to anyone? Not today. Not with my son." Students murmured, some nodding, some stunned. A few lowered their phones, suddenly ashamed to have recorded the scene at all. Bradley was shaking now, anger, fear, humiliation, all tangled together. "You can do this," he whispered. "I didn't mean—" "Yes," Marcus said. "You did." Two officers arrived through the courtyard doors, out of breath, responding to the earlier call. Marcus handed Bradley over to them. "Take him in," he said. "I'll follow." As Bradley was led away, he twisted around to glare at Gibson. "This is your fault." Gibson held his gaze, voice calm. "No, this is yours." The courtyard was so quiet, a leaf falling would have sounded like thunder. Marcus put a steady hand on Gibson's shoulder. "Come on, son," he said softly. "Let us get you home." But as they walked toward the exit, a buzz went through the courtyard phones, lighting up with notifications. The video, the rope, the tree, The crowd. It was already viral, and within an hour, the school superintendent would call. By evening, Bradley S. father would storm into the station, and by the next morning, the entire case would be standing under the spotlight of national outrage. In the courtroom of Judge Frank Caprio, morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the Providence Municipal Court, casting long lines across the polished floor. The building, usually alive with murmurs and footsteps, now felt tense thick with the weight of something larger than a normal day's docket. The video had gone viral overnight, shared millions of times. A kid tied to a tree, a crowd watching, a bully laughing, a police chief stepping in, and now the entire nation was watching to see what happened next. Inside courtroom 3, Judge Frank Caprio set his reading glasses down on the bench, exhaling slowly as he reviewed the case file handed to him by the clerk. He had seen countless disturbing things in his decades on the bench. But something about this one, about the rope, the humiliation, the silence of the bystanders stuck under his skin. "This isn't just another school fight," he murmured. His clerk nodded. "The hallway outside is packed. Reporters, parents, students. The superintendent is here, and so is the defendant as father." Judge Caprio closed the folder with a soft thud. "Bring them in." The bailiff opened the door, and the courtroom stirred like a wave. First came the murmurs, then the shifting of chairs as people leaned forward. The tension broke when the door opened again. Chief Marcus Duane entered with his son, walking beside him, calm, composed, but carrying the quiet weight of everything that had happened. Gibson S. wrists still showed faint marks where the rope had been tied. Every camera in the room zoomed in as he took a seat behind the prosecution table. Then came the other side. Bradley King was escorted in wearing county-issued gray, hands cuffed, his swagger gone. He looked smaller today. Not physically, he was still tall and athletic, but something in his posture had caved in overnight. His father stormed in behind him, a wealthy businessman in a tailored suit, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with entitlement. "This entire arrest was illegal," the father muttered loudly. "This police chief abused his power. My son is the victim here." Judge Caprio lifted a hand gently, and the room fell silent, as if someone had pressed mute. "Mr. King," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you will have your turn. Sit." The businessman froze mid-step, stunned. He wasn't used to being told what to do. Not by anyone. He took a seat grudgingly behind his son. Bradley avoided looking at Gibson. The bailiff called the case. State of Rhode Island versus Bradley King charges include felony assault, false imprisonment, physical endangerment, harassment, and violation of school safety protocols. The words hit the room like a gavel strike. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "I've seen the video," he said. "The world has seen the video. But this courtroom cares about evidence, not online outrage. We will proceed with testimony." He looked up. "Prosecution, call your first witness." Assistant District Attorney Wilson stood. "The state calls Chief Marcus Duane." Marcus approached the stand, placed his hand over the Bible, and was sworn in. His uniform was crisp, but the emotion beneath it was raw, a father holding back fury by the threads of discipline. "Chief Duane," the prosecutor began, "tell the court what you witnessed." Marcus spoke slowly, carefully. "I received a call from the school reporting a disturbance. When I arrived, I found a group of students surrounding a tree. My son's hands were tied behind it. The defendant and his friends were standing over him. He paused, jaw tight. They tied his wrists with a climbing rope, tight enough to cut into the skin. He couldn't move. He couldn't defend himself. Judge Caprio watched him closely. "How was your son behaving?" "Calm," Marcus answered. "He wasn't a fighting. He wasn't a shouting. He wasn't a resisting. He was holding himself together." "And the defendant?" Marcus looked directly at Bradley. He was smirking, calling it a joke, acting like he owned the entire courtyard. A soft gasp echoed from the gallery. Ada Wilson nodded. "Did you believe your son was in physical danger?" Marcus answered immediately. "Yes, absolutely." "And what did you do?" "I ordered the defendant to untie him. When he refused, I arrested him." From the defense table, Bradley's father shot up from his seat. "You humiliated my son in front of the entire school." This was revenge, nothing more. Judge Caprio banged his gavel once, the sound sharp and commanding. "Sit down, Mr. King. You will not disrupt these proceedings again." The room went silent. Marcus stepped down, and the prosecutor called the next witness. "The state calls Gibson Duane." A hush fell as Gibson rose. Students in the gallery leaned forward. Even Bradley looked up, not defiantly, not angrily, but with something unreadable in his eyes. Gibson stepped onto the stand. He looked young under the fluorescent courtroom lights, just a high schooler, shoulders straight, hands steady, voice quiet but clear. "Gibson," the prosecutor said gently, "tell us what happened that day." "All of it." Gibson nodded. He described everything: the first look in the courtyard, the shove at the locker, the tension in the gym, the accident with the water, the insults, the threats, the stares, the lunch under the tree, the rope, the crowd, the fear he refused to show. "And when he tied your wrists?" the prosecutor asked. "What were you thinking?" Gibson breathed in slowly, that I wasn't going to give him the reaction he wanted. Judge Caprio leaned forward, elbows on the bench. The entire room held its breath. "Why?" the judge asked softly. Gibson swallowed. "Because bullies want anger. They want fear. They want to break someone. And if I gave him that, if I gave him the power to see me scared, then he didn't just tie my hands. He would have tied my spirit too." A murmur rippled across the courtroom. One woman wiped a tear. Even a reporter lowered his phone for a moment. Judge Caprio's voice softened. "And how did it feel to be tied to that tree?" Gibson exhaled sharply. "Cold," he said. "Not the air. The silence. Everyone watching. No one stepping in. That was the coldest part." Bradley flinched. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked truly shaken. When the prosecutor finished, the defense attorney rose hesitantly, glancing at Bradley, who looked pale. "No questions," he said quietly. Judge Caprio nodded, and motioned Gibson to return to his seat. Just then, a bailiff hurried into the courtroom and whispered something into the judge's ear. Judge Caprio frowned. "What do you mean the video has been updated?" The courtroom buzzed. The judge lifted his hand, silencing everyone. "Bring the footage in," he ordered. Moments later, a screen was wheeled into the courtroom. A new angle of the viral video had surfaced. And this one revealed something no one had expected, something that would change the case entirely. The courtroom braced itself as Judge Caprio said the words, "Play it." The lights dimmed slightly as the courtroom screen flickered alive. Every breath in courtroom 3 seemed to freeze midair. Reporters stopped typing. Parents sat forward. Even the bailiffs leaned subtly closer. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses and nodded to the technician. "Start the video." The new clip began not shaky like the original student recordings, but crisp and steady, as if taken from someone deliberately filming from the shade of another tree. A different angle, a hidden spectator. The footage opened on the courtyard. Students were scattered around, but this camera captured faces. The other videos did the expressions of the bystanders, the look of hesitation in some, the complicity of silence in others. Then the lens panned toward the oak tree. There was Gibson, tied by the wrists, back pressed against the rough bark, breathing slow and controlled. Bradley stood in front of him with two of his friends laughing. The original recordings had shown this, but the new video revealed something more. "Freeze that," Judge Caprio said calmly. The screen paused. To the left, barely visible in the older clips, stood a student holding a phone with the camera facing outward. His hand shook slightly. He wasn't filming Gibson. He was live-streaming himself. Judge Caprio narrowed his eyes. "Is that on TikTok?" The courtroom gasped softly. The ADA spoke up. "Yes, Your Honor. This appears to be a live stream, with comments, real-time reactions. Continue," Caprio ordered. The video resumed. The live stream chat scrolled violently. "Bro, what are they doing? Is he tied up? Someone stop him, for this is messed up. Call the cops. Nah, Bradley is wild for this post. It'll go viral." Gibson's calm face appeared again, tired, scraped, rope digging into his wrists. And then the camera clearly picked up Bradley saying, "He needs to learn not to mess with me. I run this school." Judge Caprio froze the video again. The room went silent. A skin-tightening, goosebump-raising silence. The defense attorney closed his eyes in defeat. Bradley, seeing his own face on the screen, dropped his head into his cuffed hands. His father tensed, unsure whether to rage or collapse. "Play the rest," the judge said quietly. The final portion showed something no one had expected. As the rope was tied around Gibson's wrists, Bradley hesitated just for a split second, looking unsettled, almost guilty. But he pushed through the hesitation, urged on by the approving nod of one of his friends, who whispered, "Do it, man. Everyone's watching." Judge Caprio's brows furrowed. Peer pressure quiet, toxic, invisible. The video ended with the sound of the police cruiser pulling up and students scattering like startled birds. The screen went black. A long breath escaped the judge. He leaned back in his chair, studying both boys, one sitting upright and quiet, the other trembling and trying not to cry. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. King," he said, addressing Bradley, "do you understand that this new evidence changes the nature of your case?" Bradley nodded silently. His father stood defiantly. "Your Honor, this shows he hesitated. That means he didn't truly intend harm. He was pressured." Judge Caprio raised a hand, stopping him cold. "This shows something else," the judge said. "It shows your son knew exactly what he was doing." He looked directly into Bradley's eyes. That small hesitation, that flicker of doubt, is proof that he had a choice not to hurt someone. He leaned forward, and he chose wrong. Bradley swallowed hard, chin trembling. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the state rests." The defense attorney stood slowly. His voice was quiet, defeated. "Your Honor, my client would like to testify." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Caprio nodded. "Bring him to the stand." Bradley walked shakily to the witness stand, cuffs clinking softly. As he took the oath, his eyes barely lifted from the floor. "Mr. King," the defense attorney began, Tell the court what you were thinking that day. Bradley's voice cracked on the first word. I don't know anymore. He swallowed. I thought I had to be tough. My friends look up to me. Everyone expects me to take charge. I didn't want to lose face. Why Gibson? The attorney asked. Bradley's throat tightened. Because he didn't look scared. Everyone wants to see fear. It makes you feel important. Judge Caprio's eyes softened but remained stern. So you tied him up to impress your audience? Bradley blinked back tears. Yes. And why did you stop when you saw police? His voice broke entirely. Because then I realized how far it went. I wasn't trying to hurt him like that. I swear I wasn't T. I just lost control. Gibson watched him quietly, expression unreadable. The defense attorney stepped back. No further questions. Judge Caprio looked at the prosecutor. Cross? The ADA stepped forward. Mr. King, he said, do you believe you're a bad person? Bradley shook his head instantly. No. Then why did you act like one? Silence. I don't know, Bradley whispered. The prosecutor leaned closer. Do you understand what you did to Gibson? Bradley wiped his eyes. I humiliated him, scared him, made him feel alone. And what did he do to deserve that? Bradley's voice cracked. Nothing. The ADA stepped back. No further questions. Judge Caprio dismissed Bradley from the stand. The courtroom had fallen impossibly quiet. Everyone knew the next step would be the judge's ruling. But before he could speak, Gibson slowly stood up. Your Honor, he said quietly. May I say something? Judge Caprio nodded. Come forward. Gibson walked to the center of the courtroom between the prosecution and the defense, standing exactly in the middle, as if symbolizing something deeper. Everyone leaned in as he took a slow breath. What he said next would shape the judge's decision and change the fate of everyone in that room. The courtroom fell into a quiet so complete, it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Gibson stood in the center of the well, palms slightly open, shoulders steady but eyes carrying the weight of everything he had tried to endure in silence. Judge Frank Caprio shifted forward on his seat. Go ahead, son. We re-listening. Gibson looked around slowly at the spectators, the reporters, the families, the teachers from Lakeview High, who had come to see how far things had spiraled. Then his gaze rested briefly on Bradley, who sat hunched over the defense table, hands trembling, his confident swagger broken into something small and frightened. Gibson cleared his throat. I didn't come here to destroy anyone's life, he said, voice soft but steady. I came here because what happened wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. Bradley kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Gibson continued, speaking with a quiet authority that made the entire courtroom lean forward. Everyone saw the rope. Everyone saw the tree. Everyone saw me tied up like a trophy. But what they didn't see, he paused, was what it felt like. His voice wavered for just a moment, then steadied again. When you're tied up, you realize very quickly that you have no control. You can defend yourself. You can fight back. You can stop anything from happening. And the worst part isn't the fear, it's the silence around you. He looked at the judge, then at the rows of students behind him. I saw kids filming me. I saw kids laughing. I saw kids who knew it was wrong but were too scared to say anything. And I get that fear is powerful. But what I felt wasn't just fear. It was, he exhaled, loneliness. Bradley winced, eyes watering. Gibson continued. My dad told me once that the strongest person in the room is the one who chooses not to hurt others. I tried to live by that. Even when Bradley shoved me in the hallway, even when he tried to embarrass me in class, even when he knocked me around during practice, I stayed calm because I wanted a fresh start. He paused, but I didn't expect that wanting peace would make me a target. A murmur passed through the courtroom, and Bradley Gibson turned to him. I know you think you're supposed to be this tough guy. I know people around you expect it. But tying someone to a tree doesn't make you strong. It makes you afraid. Afraid of losing the attention, the power, the fear people hand you. Bradley blinked hard, tears slipping down his cheeks. Gibson's voice softened, almost like he was speaking to a wounded version of him. I am not asking the court to ruin your future. I just want you to learn something from this. Something real. Because what you did wasn't a prank. It wasn't a joke. It was an attack. And the next time you lose control, you might not have someone's dad showing up in time. Silence. Absolute, echoing silence. Gibson took a breath. So all I ask, Your Honor, is justice, not revenge. He stepped back, hands clasped behind him. Judge Caprio watched him for a long moment, admiration, sorrow, and resolve blending across his face. Then he turned his gaze to Bradley. Stand, Mr. King. Bradley rose shakily. Mr. King, the judge began, voice firm but calm. What you did was not only cruel, it was criminal. It was a violation of another student's safety, dignity, and humanity. You treated the schoolyard like your empire and your peers like subjects to control. Bradley wiped his face with his cuffed hands. But, Caprio continued, I saw something in the video that many courts never get to see. Hesitation. A split second where the real you almost stepped in to stop the version of you the world keeps encouraging. Bradley nodded, swallowing hard. And I heard something in this courtroom today, the judge added, that most victims never say. Forgiveness. Gibson's father shifted in his seat, emotions caught between pride and pain. Judge Caprio leaned forward. So here is my ruling. The courtroom leaned in collectively. Bradley King, you will be removed from Lakeview High immediately. You will attend a behavioral rehabilitation school specializing in youth aggression and intervention. You will complete 200 hours of community service under police supervision, and you will attend counseling twice a week for 6 months. Bradley's father closed his eyes with relief. It could have been jail. But, the judge said, raising a finger, before any of that begins, you will complete one more task. Bradley looked up, confused. You will stand in front of the entire student body of Lakeview High with your father, your principal, and Mr. Gibson present, and you will apologize publicly. Not because the school demands it, but because you need to. Gasps floated through the room. A public apology. A dismantling of his self-built throne. And you will tell them, Caprio added, what Gibson taught you here today, that silence can be a weapon, that control without compassion is weakness, and that strength without integrity is nothing. Bradley nodded, tears streaming. I will, Your Honor. I am sorry, he said, looking directly at Gibson, for everything. Gibson nodded once, quiet and dignified. Judge Caprio lifted his gavel. This case is concluded. Bang. The sound echoed through the courtroom, final, decisive, unforgettable. As the room emptied, Gibson's father placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. You handled yourself like a man today, he said softly. Gibson exhaled, the weight finally lifting. "I just didn't want to become like him," he whispered. His father smiled with sad pride. "That's exactly why you never will." They walked out together, two silhouettes leaving the courthouse, one tall and strong in uniform, the other young but steady, shaped not by violence, but by restraint. Behind them, the oak tree at Lakeview High would never be just a tree again. It would be a reminder of power, of choice, of courage, of a boy who stayed silent but never weak. The sun sat low over Providence when Gibson and his father stepped out of the courthouse, the evening breeze brushing against their faces. It should be felt like the end of a long, painful chapter. Instead, it felt like the final calm before the next storm, because the real part of the judge's sentence, the public apology, still lay ahead, and the whole town was waiting for it. By the next morning, Lakeview High looked nothing like a school. News vans crowded the entrance. Reporters stood with microphones ready. Parents filled the sidewalks. Students lined the courtyard railings. The viral video had turned a single act of violence into a national conversation about school bullying, privilege, and responsibility. Gibson walked beside his father, the police chief, through the front doors. Every step echoed. Every whisper followed. "There he is, that's the kid from the video." He didn't even fight back respect. But Gibson kept his gaze forward, calm, steady, unshaken. Principal George waited for them at the assembly hall doors, his face pale with nerves. "The auditorium is full," he said quietly. "Bradley and his father are waiting backstage." Gibson nodded once. Inside, the auditorium was packed, hundreds of students, teachers, and staff. The murmurs filled the air like restless waves. Posters displaying messages like "Stand against bullying" and "Strength is not cruelty" hung along the walls. Reporters had been barred, but phones were everywhere. The principal stepped up to the microphone. "Today," he said, "we confront what our school allowed to grow unchecked. Today is about accountability and change." A few students shifted uncomfortably. "And before anything else," he continued, "Bradley King will address all of you." The entire room turned toward the stage wings. Bradley stepped out. But he wasn't the Bradley they were used to, the loud one, the swaggering king of the hallways. This Bradley looked older somehow. His shoulders drooped, his eyes swollen from sleeplessness. Fear, shame, and regret clung to him like a second skin. His father walked behind him, hand on his back, gentle, guiding. Bradley took the podium. The room fell silent. "I messed up," he started, voice thick. "No, I didn't just mess up. I was cruel. I humiliated someone. I hurt someone. And the worst part? I did it because I thought I could. Because I thought no one would stop me. No one breathed. When Gibson came here, I felt threatened. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't disrespect me. He didn't try to take anything from me. But I acted like the school belonged to me. Like respect was something people owed me." He paused, swallowing hard. "I tied someone to a tree," he said. "I tied a human being to a tree like he didn't matter. And every time I close my eyes, I see his face calm, steady, while I acted like a monster." Students stared, stunned. "I'm sorry," Bradley said, voice cracking. "To all of you. But especially to you, Gibson." He turned. The room turned with him. Gibson stood slowly from the chair next to his father. Their eyes met not as enemies, but as two boys standing at the edge of who they used to be. Bradley continued, voice trembling. "You didn't scream. You didn't fight. You didn't beg. You just talked to me like a human being even when I didn't act like one. And that did something to me. Something I can't explain." He wiped his face. "You showed me that strength isn't in hurting people. It's just in controlling yourself when you have every reason to lose control." Silence. Heavy, emotional. Principal George stepped forward. "Gibson, would you like to speak?" The auditorium waited. Gibson walked to the podium, his footsteps slow, composed. He faced the crowd not with anger, not with pride, but with something deeper. "I didn't want this," he said softly. "Any of it." The students shifted, listening carefully. "I came here to start fresh, to be invisible if I could. But the first day I arrived, I learned something important. Some people get louder when they feel threatened, and some people stay silent because they were scared." His eyes scanned the room. "Bradley tried to break me. But honestly," he exhaled, "I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at myself for hoping this school would be different from the last one." A ripple of murmurs. "But I learned something too. Silence isn't a weakness. And speaking up isn't a loudness. It is choosing the moment when your voice matters most." He nodded once toward Bradley. He apologized. And I forgave him. Because we can ask people to change if we don't allow them the chance. The room held its breath. I don't want revenge. I don't want Bradley expelled forever. I want him to come back one day as someone better. Someone stronger in the right way. And I hope the rest of us learn something too. He stepped back, letting the words sink in. That strength isn't measured by who you can push down, but by who you can lift up. The auditorium erupted not in cheers, but in something deeper. A wave of respect, recognition, understanding. Even teachers wiped their eyes. Principal George approached the podium again. "Thank you, Gibson," he said softly. "Thank you." Then he turned to the school and let this day stand as a line in the sand. Lakeview High will no longer tolerate cruelty disguised as confidence. We will rebuild what we allowed to break. As the assembly ended, students gathered around Gibson, not crowding him, but approaching with humility. A boy from his math class murmured, "You were brave." A girl from the cafeteria whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't step in." A teammate said, "You got a spot on a team if you want it." Then Bradley approached. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Bradley extended his hand. Gibson looked at it, then shook it firmly. A small nod passed between them, an unspoken agreement that the past was behind them, and whatever came next would be built differently. When Gibson and his father walked out of the auditorium, the sunlight felt warmer, softer, freer. His father placed a hand on his back. "You changed something today," he said quietly. Gibson smiled faintly. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe the school changed itself." They stepped outside into the bright afternoon, the crowd parting to let them through. Behind them, Lakeview High stood silent, not as a place of fear or dominance, but as a campus where something powerful had just begun. Accountability, compassion, and a new kind of strength. And for the first time since stepping onto that campus, Gibson felt like he truly belonged. And that day, inside Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, something bigger than punishment happened. A school learned what real strength looks like. A bully learned what accountability means. And a quiet young man proved that dignity is louder than violence. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful courtroom stories. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, Justice always finds its way.